So all of the fun was had at the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee, which saw a walkout from Paul O'Sullivan. And it raised the temperature to an unprecedented level. Welcome to the Political Insider. Let's break down what happened with Paul O'Sullivan's dramatic walkout of Parliament yesterday. Paul O'Sullivan is everything that drives the comrades in South Africa mad. He is a white foreigner who moved to South Africa during apartheid. Now, immediately you got a whole lot of people that weren't alive in that era making assumptions about the guy because of that issue. Then on top of it, he's very fluid when it comes to his CV. In a place where we've got people with great qualifications but have done terrible things. Here's a guy who's got qualifications from 1,000 years ago, and these people think that this is the most important measure of the man was his qualifications that he got in the 1970s. On top of it, O'Sullivan was in the British military. Another problem, they see him in a tall ship coming to colonize countries in Africa. And to make matters worse, when he was in the military, he was in the intelligence corps of the British military, which makes all of the members of Parliament think that he's James Bond and he's some kind of super spy. And on top of all of this, Paul O'Sullivan is maddeningly arrogant. Another problem that we have. So you couldn't create a more toxic person for Parliament to have to deal with. But it does get worse, because on top of this, Paul O'Sullivan has been successful in showing up corruption within the political class. And these are people that are known to the members of Parliament, and they hate that. So they are convinced that he's some sort of Victorian spy who's going to return the country to the British monarchy using the cunning trick of exposing criminality. They absolutely, this is the red rag to the bull. And yesterday, O'Sullivan put the cherry on that particular cake by walking out of Parliament. Why did O'Sullivan walk out of Parliament? Well, O'Sullivan had agreed a finishing time with the commission chair, the committee chair, Soviet Lekhanyani from the ANC. And as that time approached, he warned that the time was approaching. The questions dragged on, the questions on questions, and at a point in time, he just packed up his goods and he went. Let's have a look.
If General Khumalo wants to tailor evidence to point in that direction, let him also tailor the evidence showing what crimes it is I'm alleged to have committed. Because absolutely I have not been involved in any crime syndicates of any nature whatsoever. And that, unfortunately, is that, yeah, I have reached a point now, Chairman, where I have to go.
No, Chair is not going to leave. Walking out of Parliament.
Yes.
Oh. Chair, he cannot be allowed. He's doing the same thing with Patoyi. You can't leave here. Yes, we are appearing before us.
Unfortunately, I made it
clear.
We don't
care about your flight.
Thank you.
You're not being released here. You must be arrested. We'll open a case now.
Pardon?
We'll open a case no. Now. This man must not be allowed to go out of this country.
I did not come here on a summons. I came here of my own free will, and I'm leaving of my own free will.
I think that he can go.
Mr. O'Sullivan.
The question that I had for him is...
Mr. O'Sullivan.
He wanted...
Mr. O'Sullivan.
Now, as you can see, this brought howls of protest from Julius Malema. And clearly, Julius Malema missed the irony when he claimed that O'Sullivan should respect Parliament, that Julius Malema has built his entire brand on disrespecting Parliament. This is a guy, the payback the money guy. Remember, the guy who physically fought the protectors in Parliament that created the spectacle of rushing the stage. His disruption of Parliament is what the EFF is built on. And now he's complaining that O'Sullivan is disrespecting the committee by walking out at the agreed time. The MK MPs, desperate to show that they if the times were different, would have been brave soldiers, tried to jump in to block O'Sullivan's departure, but seemed unsure what they did to do when they got to O'Sullivan. These are brave soldiers in their minds only. So the whole thing descended into farce. And the chair, Soviet Lechonriane, who's been pretty good in his job, seemed absolutely unsure as to what to do. And the whole thing is a sad indictment on the process of the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee. And the whole big soap opera is more of a mark on the irrelevance of this Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee. I, for one, held a lot of hope for this Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee because I thought at least we will know what they're doing and the parties would hold each other accountable. And because this was a parliamentary process, you couldn't get our president saying, I'm applying my mind, and then do nothing about it. It would have to come out because it's answerable to Parliament, many parties. But the parliamentarians have chosen to parliamentarian and to do party politics. And this spectacle probably best shows that, once again, everybody seems to be very good at wasting taxpayer money. I thought the taxpayer money may be up the road at the Madlanga Commission, but it turns out it's down the road at the Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee. Who knows where this leads this committee to, but it's very hard to see a coherent report coming out of that committee. Who's going to agree on what? You had Ashley Sauls from the Patriotic Alliance saying that Paul O'Sullivan is a patriot, doing great work, holding people to account, and then you've got these other people saying that he's a British spy. So what does that report look like? And who pens it? And there's no agreement, there's no facts, there's no evidence. Parliamentary Ad Hoc Committee has turned into a joke, and yesterday was probably fitting that the joke should end up like that. I'll tell you what's not a joke, and that is the state of the city of Johannesburg. And we are holding an event, a breakfast event, with Helen Ziller on this Friday, the 6th of March in Sandton. And joining me on the panel will be renowned and respected analyst Sandile Swana, where we will be hearing from Helen Ziller and asking her a few of those questions that you would have on your mind. If you want to be in the live audience, visit our website at sona.co.za or get more information below. Book your place. Come and join us at the event. You're going to get breakfast. You're going to get to hear from some great analysts, and you can put your question to Helen Ziller. So if you're considering doing it, support us by coming to that particular breakfast. On our next piece, I'd like to move up the road to the Madlanga Commission, where the Madlanga Commission was hearing from suspended executive from the city of Ekurhuleni, Linda Kasheka. Now, she was very much part of management of Ekurhuleni, part of the machinery. But yesterday at that commission, she saw the gap and she took it. Let's remember, she's been suspended. Let's remember why one of the things that she has done is she was the person who actually dropped the process against Julius Mkhwanazi. But instead of her explaining how she got to that, everything was blamed on former city manager, the discredited Imogen Mashazi, as well as their head of legal, equally discredited Kemi Bahari. They were the reasons for everything. And yeah, she was really claimed that she had done what she had done in lifting the suspension of Mkhwanazi because she was instructed to do this, and she didn't want to do this. In fact, she wanted to increase his suspension, and she claimed that she was just like the super public servant. Yeah, it's hard to believe what is up and what is down in Ekurhuleni, how somebody could be in there. There's a good chance she was trying to do her job and bad people didn't like that, and that's why she was suspended. You could equally make the case that she was part of this and eventually some other good guys came in and suspended her. But to me, the most staggering part of the whole testimony, the whole Madlanga Commission, was when she explained the details of her salary. She moved to the city of Ekurhuleni, having worked at the city of Johannesburg. Now remember, she is not a political appointee. She is a public servant. She is there to do a job. And she was employed at a salary of over 2 million rand, and later given a much questioned and disputed 600,000 per annum increase. That gives her a salary of nearly 2.7 million rand a year, a public servant. And she was not even at the top of the tree in the city. It's not like she ran the city. She was just on the executive. Now, yeah, she can explain what happened, and this is a bad guy, and this is a bad person, and all of this. But what I couldn't get by is that these are the people that we are paying these staggering salaries to do a job. Now, let's compare that to the private sector. So she's on the executive of the city of Ekurhuleni, and the city has never been in worse shape, and she's not the only one earning these fantastical salaries. It's got potholes on every road. But neither the traffic lights nor the street lights worked. In actual fact, the city of Ekurhuleni has started a new thing where they're removing the traffic lights because they're never going to start working again. Right? The city doesn't work. There's litter strewn everywhere. There's informal settlements all over Ekurhuleni. There are beggars on every street, but at least sometimes the beggars get to direct traffic because there's no metro policeman because they're too busy shaking down drug dealers or doing whatever the metro police are doing. Now, that salary that she earns of 2.7 million rand would be an extremely senior salary in any private sector company. And we deal with the private sector all the time. In actual fact, sometimes you just pull into a supermarket and you expect the shelves to be full. You expect the milk to be cold. You expect the bread to be fresh. You go to a filling station, you expect the petrol to be in the pump. And all of this works because the CEO ensures that the executive does their job, and the executive ensures that the middle management does their job, and so on and so forth. And nobody earns that kind of salary without making sure that everybody beneath them is doing their job. Here you've got a public servant in a city that was bad when she got there and got worse since she got there. And I'm not blaming this all on her. I'm saying this is just emblematic of what is happening. She's earning a salary that's on par with any executive at any of these private companies. Of course, they're going to trot out the example of some high-flying CEO that cashes in their share options and makes 100 million rand in a year. But that person has earned it through performance. Now, why is it that somebody as poor at her job as this person is could not make a difference to the city? How do they end up earning salaries like this? And if one thing could emerge from these commissions, because please God, we should have some crooked people go to jail. But perhaps another thing that comes out of this is let's review these crazy salaries that these people get for unbelievably average work. Where they're working, there's no overtime, there's no hard work, there's no risk management, there's no management. They don't deserve these salaries, and it's theft of our tax money, and it's working to cripple our cities. So if we are looking to improve our bang for the buck, let's just put those civil servant salaries in line with their private sector counterparts, and let's hold them to the same account. That way we'll get what we pay for, rather than this mess where we have to listen to this person say, that's not my responsibility. I didn't do this. I didn't do this. What did you do? Is the question that I would love to know. But these bloated bureaucracies are costing us a fortune, and it's driving everybody mad. Let's actually talk about the budget. Now, we recently had the budget, and it has been very, very well received, and so it should. It's a common sense budget that has just enough for everybody in there to be kind of happy. You know it's a good budget because it was slammed by both the EFF and Mkhonto weSizwe. They both said this was a bad budget, so therefore, using sort of normal logic, it can't be all that bad. Understand that South Africa is in the slow recovery from junk status that was started back in the Zuma years. And I don't want to give Cyril Ramaphosa a free pass on this because he did nothing until he lost the election. Now, perhaps we should thank the formation of the government of national unity. And I do think that's a large part of this. Perhaps it was the miscalculation of Godongwana's 2025 budget when he tried to increase VAT, and it sort of sobered everybody up, and suddenly we get a common sense budget. Or perhaps it was the dressing down that President Ramaphosa and his fellow travelers got in the Oval Office at the hands of Donald Trump last year. But suddenly it seems to have dawned on our politicians that if we should at least get one thing right, let's get the finances better than what they have been. And this budget, which has not increased our debt significantly, which has shown that there's enough money to do a lot of things, we're starting to hear murmurs of a credit upgrade. Now, this is not going to happen immediately, but all of the major agencies, S&P, Fitch, Moody's, are all monitoring our credit status with an eye towards improving roughly our BB rating. I don't know why they have these stupid ratings. You've got BB minus and BB plus and AA. I mean, like, just make it 1 to 10 or something that we could all understand a little easier. But basically, we're near the bottom of the pile, right? South Africa was in junk status, and we're starting our move up that ladder. And perhaps it's time to consider what happens if the country does start to experience the inevitable economic growth that comes from good economic management. Let's just remember what happened the last time this happened, because we've got a precedent for this, and it happened in the 2000s. We had good economic growth, well, better than what we're used to. It's not China growth or anything spectacular, but we were around 4 or 5%. We were chewing into unemployment, we were building infrastructure, things were much better. The ANC got a just reward for that. It was a united organization, they had an overwhelming majority. But there were many within that ruling party that didn't want success, they wanted failure. And this led to Polokwane in 2007 and the imposition of Jacob Zuma as the president. Now, you should ask yourself, why would people that stood to benefit the most, or were politically benefiting the most, why did they want the country to fail? Quite simply, a successful country has many eyes on it and many reviews. And it's very hard to not act on corruption. It's very hard to not have a functional police service, a functional airport, or this or that, the other. There's certain expectations. And in that environment, it's hard to steal money. Part of the functionality that comes with a successful country is a successful criminal justice system. And that was too much for some of the comrades. And they would rather be rich in a failed country than have to work hard in a successful country. So they brought down the successful country. But those people are no longer in a united ANC. They sit in Mkhonto weSizwe, they sit in the EFF, they sit in these other little places, and they are desperate for the country to fail so that they can go back to the trough. So what I'm suggesting here is, I am not saying we are out of the woods, but there's a good chance that if we have economic growth, if we do have upgrades, credit upgrades and so on, politically, it wouldn't be as divisive as the past. You'd have those parties moaning like hell because that's the way they are, but the rest of us would work much better. We'd have better lives. So it's been a good week for South Africa, and I want to leave you on that positive note just to consider what happens if South Africa gets success. We might just be ready to do something good with it. Let's not get our hopes dashed. All I'm saying is that just imagine that the landscape is different to what it was 20 years ago. Let's enjoy it. We'll see you again on the Political Insider. Subscribe to the channel. Thanks for joining us today.